The plasma bolts screamed past Lieutenant Jake Morrison's head as he dove behind the twisted metal wreckage. His squad was pinned down on the surface of Valora Prime, surrounded by hostile forces that had appeared out of nowhere. The diplomatic mission had gone sideways in seconds. And now, they were fighting for their lives, against creatures that moved faster than anything human. Jake fired 3 quick bursts from his rifle, dropping 2 of the attackers. These weren't the peaceful delegates Earth had expected to meet. These were predators. And humans were the prey. "Morrison, we've got movement on the left flank," Sergeant Lisa Hayes shouted over the comm. Her voice was steady, despite the chaos erupting around them. Jake pivoted and saw her. She stood on a platform above the battlefield, wearing armor that looked like it was forged from starlight itself. Her crimson eyes locked onto his, and everything else seemed to fade into background noise. She was beautiful in a way that made his tactical training scream warnings, with silver hair that flowed like liquid metal and skin so pale it was almost luminescent. She raised one hand, and the enemy forces froze mid-attack. Complete silence descended on the battlefield like a physical weight. Jake kept his weapon trained on her, but something in those ancient eyes told him that bullets wouldn't matter here. "Humans," she said, and her voice carried across the distance, without any amplification. "You fight well for such fragile creatures. I am Princess Arya of House Nightshade, first daughter of the Eternal Throne." Jake's finger hovered over the trigger. "We came in peace. Your people attacked us." A slight smile crossed her lips, revealing fangs that caught the sunlight. "Those are not my people. They are rebels who wish to start a war between our species. I have been hunting them across 3 systems." "Then why the grand entrance?" Jake asked, not lowering his rifle. Arya stepped off the platform and simply floated down to the ground, her boots touching the scorched earth with barely a sound. She walked toward him with movements that were too graceful to be natural. Every instinct Jake had developed in 10 years of military service told him to run. But he held his ground, because I wanted to see the human who led his warriors into an ambush, yet managed to keep them all alive. I wanted to see the tactician who turned a death trap into a defensive position within seconds. She stopped, 3 meters away from him. "I wanted to see you, Jake Morrison." His blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things, Lieutenant. I know that you are about to change the course of galactic history." She turned to address his entire squad, who had emerged from cover with weapons still raised. "I know that your species has been underestimated by every empire in this sector. And I know that this human before me possesses something rare, even among my own people. True courage, without recklessness. Strategy without cruelty." Jake exchanged glances with Lisa, who looked as confused as he felt. "What do you want, Princess?" Arya's eyes returned to him, and in them he saw something that made no sense. Recognition. As if she had been searching for him specifically. "What I want, Lieutenant Morrison, is to prevent a war that would consume billions of lives. And to do that, I need you to trust me. The rebel faction that attacked you wants to frame my family for acts of aggression against Earth. They want your government to declare war on the Valoran Empire. Why would they want that? Because they believe humans are weak. They believe one decisive strike will break your spirit and allow them to seize power from my father's throne." Her expression hardened. Ma CC, they are wrong about your species. I have studied humanity for decades. You are the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Precisely because you do not know when to quit." The alien vampire princess stood before the human squad leader, her crimson eyes reflecting an intelligence that had witnessed centuries of conflict. Jake Morrison felt the weight of her gaze, knowing that whatever happened next would ripple across the stars in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Princess Arya moved through the rebel compound with Jake and his squad following close behind. The facility was carved into the side of a crystalline mountain, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that cast everything in shades of blue and violet. Jake's tactical visor was picking up heat signatures everywhere, But Arya had assured them that most were just automated systems. "Stay close, and do not fire unless I give the word," Arya said without looking back. "The rebels have sensor nets throughout this complex. One wrong move, and we will alert every warrior they have stationed here." Corporal Danny Martinez whispered into the squad channel. "Anyone else getting serious bad vibes from this? We're following a vampire princess into her enemy's base. This could be the setup of the century." "Stow it, Martinez," Lisa said sharply. "We don't have many options right now." Jake agreed silently. Their transport had been destroyed in the initial ambush, and the nearest human outpost was 3 days away on foot through hostile territory. Arya had offered them a way out, but the price was helping her infiltrate this rebel stronghold to gather intelligence on their plans. They rounded a corner, and Arya suddenly pressed herself against the wall, gesturing for them to do the same. 2 guards passed by, their elongated forms moving with that unsettling grace all Valorans seemed to possess. These ones wore black armor with red accents, and Jake could see energy weapons holstered at their sides. Once the guards disappeared, Arya continued forward. "The command center is 2 levels below us. That is where they keep their communication arrays and strategic databases. I need access to those systems." Once the guards disappeared, "What exactly are you looking for?" Jake asked, keeping his voice low. "Proof. Evidence that will convince both my father and your government that this attack was orchestrated by a radical faction, not sanctioned by the Empire. Without that proof, Ambassador Collins will recommend military action when he reports back to Earth." Jake felt ice in his veins. Collins had been in the delegation transport when the rebels hit them. "The ambassador is alive?" Arya hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Yes. The rebels are holding him in the detention wing. They plan to execute him publicly and broadcast it across human space as a declaration of war from the Valoran Empire. Then, we need to extract him first," Jake said immediately. "Negative. If we attempt a rescue before securing the data, they will purge their systems, and we will lose all evidence. The ambassador's execution is scheduled for tomorrow, at dawn. We have time." Lisa stepped forward. "With all due respect, Princess, we don't leave people behind. That's not how humans operate." Arya turned to face them fully. And for a moment, Jake saw something like respect in those ancient eyes. "I understand your loyalty to your own. It is admirable. But think strategically, Lieutenant. If we save one man but allow a war to begin, how many millions will die? The ambassador himself would tell you to complete the mission first." Jake hated that she was right. He had seen Collins's file. The man was a career diplomat who had prevented 3 interplanetary conflicts through negotiation alone. Collins would absolutely prioritize preventing war over his own survival. "Fine," Jake said through gritted teeth. "We get the data first, but then we extract Collins. No arguments." Agreed. They moved deeper into the compound, descending through service corridors that Arya navigated with perfect confidence. Jake wondered how she knew this place so well. When he asked, her response was cryptic. "I have walked many roads in my long life, Lieutenant. Some of them led through darkness. The command center was protected by a security door that looked like it could withstand a nuclear blast." Arya placed her hand on a scanner, and Jake expected alarms to blare. Instead, the door hissed open smoothly. "How did you do that?" Martinez asked, shocked. "I told you I have been hunting these rebels for months. I have my methods." She stepped into the command center, which was mercifully empty. Banks of holographic displays showed tactical maps, supply routes, and communication logs. "Start downloading everything. We have approximately 7 minutes before the automated security sweep notices the door access." Jake's team got to work, connecting portable drives to the alien systems. Lisa had some experience with Valoran technology from her intelligence training, and she guided the others through the process. Jake stayed near the door, weapon ready, while Arya examined one of the displays. Her expression darkened as she read whatever information scrolled across the screen. This is worse than I thought, she murmured. What did you find? The rebels have already sent false communiques to several other human colonies, claiming to be official representatives of the Empire. They are trying to provoke incidents across multiple systems simultaneously. By the time anyone realizes it is a coordinated deception, the war will have already begun. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. How many colonies? 15. And they are planning additional attacks within the next 72 hours. Arya's hands clenched into fists. They are trying to ensure the conflict cannot be stopped through diplomacy. Then we stop them here, Jake said flatly. Arya looked at him with something that might have been curiosity. You speak as if you have already decided to trust me completely. Jake had been asking himself the same question. By all logic, he should be suspicious of everything the vampire princess said and did. But something in his gut told him she was being honest. Maybe it was the way she fought to protect his squad from the rebels. Maybe it was the genuine anger he saw in her eyes when she talked about preventing war. Or maybe he was just a fool. Because if you wanted us dead, we would already be dead, he said simply. And because I have spent my entire military career learning to read people, you are telling the truth. Arya studied him for a long moment, and Jake could have sworn he saw surprise flicker across her face. You are perceptive for one so young. How old are you, anyway? Old enough to know that age does not always bring wisdom. A faint smile touched her lips. I am 347 years old by your calendar. Still young by Valoran standards. 5. Senti 2. Martinez whistled softly. Lady, you look amazing for your age. The tension broke slightly, and even Arya seemed amused. Your species has an admirable ability to find humor in dire situations. It is kind of our thing, Lisa said, finishing the data transfer. We have everything, Lieutenant. Multiple redundant copies. Good. Now we get Collins and get out of here. They retraced their steps through the compound, moving faster now that they had what they came for. The detention wing was on the opposite side of the facility, which meant crossing through several heavily trafficked areas. Arya seemed confident they could manage it. They were halfway across an open courtyard when everything went wrong. A Valoran warrior stepped out from behind a support column directly in front of them. She was tall even by their standards, wearing the black and red armor of the rebel faction. Her eyes widened when she saw Arya. Princess Nightshade, the warrior said, her voice dripping with contempt. The traitor reveals herself at last. Lord Kaine will be pleased. Arya's posture shifted into something predatory. Commander Vex. Still serving megalomaniacs, I see. Some habits never change. Vex smiled, showing fangs longer than Arya's. The humans are under arrest for trespassing in military territory. Surrender them to me, and perhaps my lord will show mercy. I think not. Vex raised her hand, and suddenly the courtyard was flooded with rebel warriors. They emerged from doorways and dropped from overhead walkways, surrounding Jake's squad in seconds. There had to be at least 40 of them. Jake raised his rifle, knowing it was probably futile. His squad formed a defensive circle, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Stand down, Lieutenant, Arya said quietly. This is my fight. Are you insane? There are 40 of them. Arya turned to look at him, and Jake saw something in her eyes that was both terrifying and magnificent. I am the first daughter of the Eternal Throne. I am Princess Arya Nightshade, and I have walked through battles that would break these pretenders. Trust me one more time. Jake Morrison. Before he could respond, Arya stepped forward into the open space between the two groups. Energy seemed to crackle around her, and her eyes blazed with crimson light. I challenge you, Vex, Arya said, her voice echoing with power. Single combat under the old laws. The humans are neutral parties in this conflict, and I claim the right to defend them, according to tradition. Vex laughed, but Jake heard uncertainty in it. You would invoke the ancient rites? Those laws are antiquated, Princess. They are still laws. Will you break them in front of your warriors? Will you show yourself to be without honor? The tension in the courtyard was thick enough to cut with a knife. The rebel warriors looked at each other uncertainly. Apparently, these ancient laws still carried weight. Finally, Vex nodded. Very well. I accept your challenge. When I defeat you, the humans will still be taken prisoner, and you will be delivered to Lord Cain in chains. When you lose, your warriors will let us pass unharmed, and you will tell us where you are holding Ambassador Collins. Agreed. The two vampire women faced each other in the center of the courtyard. Jake wanted to intervene, to not let Arya fight alone, but Lisa grabbed his arm. This is their culture, Lieutenant. We cannot interfere without dishonoring her. Jake watched helplessly as Arya and Vex began to circle each other. The fight that followed was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. They moved faster than his eyes could properly track. Blurs of motion that collided with sounds like thunder. When they connected, the impact sent shockwaves through the air that Jake could feel in his chest. Arya fought with precision and grace, every movement economical and purposeful. Vex was powerful and aggressive, throwing devastating strikes that would have killed a human instantly. They exchanged blows for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes. Then Arya did something that shocked everyone. She caught Vex's fist in mid-strike, twisted, and drove her opponent to the ground with such force that the stone cracked beneath them. Before Vex could recover, Arya had her pinned with one hand around her throat. Yield, Arya commanded. Vex struggled for a moment, then went still. I yield. Arya released her and stood, not even breathing hard. She looked at the surrounding rebels with imperial authority. The challenge is won. Honor your commander's agreement. The warriors backed away, creating a path. Vex slowly got to her feet, wiping purple blood from her lip. The ambassador is in detention. Cell 7. Sub-level 3. You have until dawn before Lord Cain arrives to oversee the execution. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety. That is all I need, Arya said. They found Ambassador Collins in a cell that was surprisingly comfortable, given the circumstances. The older man looked tired, but unharmed. His eyes widened when he saw Arya, Princess Nightshade. I must say, I did not expect to see you here. Ambassador Collins. I apologize for the delay in reaching you. We had to secure evidence first. Collins nodded, understanding. Then you know about the rebel plot to start a war. I managed to piece together some of their plan from listening to the guards talk. This goes deeper than we thought. Mine, I know. Which is why what I am about to propose will sound insane. Arya took a deep breath. I need to make a declaration that will bind both our peoples together in a way that cannot be easily broken by political manipulation. Jake felt a strange prickling at the back of his neck. What kind of declaration? 1. Arya turned to face him directly, and in her eyes was a determination that seemed to pierce right through him. A marriage bond. The most sacred alliance in Velaran culture. Once declared before witnesses, it cannot be undone except by death. It creates ties between families, houses, and in this case, entire species. The words seemed to hang in the air like a physical presence. Jake stared at her, certain he had misheard. A marriage bond. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. If I declare you as my chosen spouse, before a gathering of witnesses from both our peoples, it will create a political alliance that supersedes any attempts by the rebels to start a war. My father will be bound by honor to protect Earth as he would our own territories. Your government will have a direct tie to the Velaran throne that gives you legitimacy in galactic politics. That is completely insane, Lisa said, speaking for everyone. You just met him hours ago. Time is irrelevant in matters of strategic necessity. I have observed Lieutenant Morrison long enough to know he possesses the qualities necessary for such a bond. He is honorable, courageous, and capable of thinking beyond his own immediate interests. More importantly, he has the strength to stand beside me, without being overshadowed. Jake felt like the ground was tilting under his feet. You want to marry me to prevent a war? Yes. What if I refuse? Arya's expression softened slightly. Then I will find another way. Though I cannot promise it will be as effective. I will not force you, Jake Morrison, but I am asking you to consider the lives that hang in the balance. The rebels will attack 15 human colonies within 3 days. Thousands will die in the initial strikes, millions more in the war that follows. This bond could prevent all of that. Ambassador Collins cleared his throat. As much as I hate to say it, Lieutenant, she is right. The political ramifications of such a union would be enormous. It would force both sides to come to the negotiating table rather than rushing to war. Jake looked at his squad. Martinez looked shocked. Lisa looked worried. They were leaving the decision to him. He thought about all the civilians on those 15 colonies who had no idea what was coming. He thought about the soldiers on both sides who would die in a war neither side really wanted. He thought about his duty as an officer to protect innocent lives. And he thought about Arya herself. In the short time he had known her, she had been honest with him. She had fought beside them, protected them, and shown more integrity than many humans he had served with. She was asking him to make an enormous sacrifice, yes, but she was willing to make the same sacrifice herself. What would this marriage bond actually entail? Jake asked carefully. It would be a formal declaration, witnessed by representatives from both our peoples. After that, we would need to maintain the appearance of a genuine partnership when in public. In private, the arrangement would be whatever we agree to make it. I am not asking for your affection, Lieutenant. Only your cooperation. For how long? Until the threat of war is permanently resolved. That could take months or years. I cannot give you a definite timeline. Jake took a deep breath and made the decision that would change his life forever. Fine. I will do it. But I have conditions. Arya raised an eyebrow. Name them. First, my squad gets full protection under your house until they can safely return to Earth. Second, you work with me as an equal partner, not as some human pet you are showing off. Third, if this arrangement becomes genuinely harmful to either of us, we find a way to end it that does not restart the war. Agreed to all conditions. You are more practical than I expected. I have my moments. So how do we do this? Arya looked at Ambassador Collins. We will need to arrange a gathering with both human and Valoran witnesses. The declaration must be public to be binding. I will contact my father and arrange for a formal assembly within 48 hours. Collins nodded slowly. I can reach out to Fleet Command and request their presence. Though I should warn you, Lieutenant Morrison, this is going to create one hell of a political firestorm back on Earth. Better than an actual firestorm, Jake said dryly. They escaped the rebel compound under cover of darkness, with Arya leading them through passages that avoided most of the patrols. She contacted her father's flagship using an encrypted channel, and within hours a royal transport had arrived to extract them. The ship that came for them was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was massive, gleaming white and silver, with lines that suggested both elegance and lethal capability. The crew members they encountered treated Arya with deep respect and looked at the humans with undisguised curiosity. Jake and his squad were given quarters that were luxurious by military standards. Real beds, private facilities, and more space than they knew what to do with. But Jake could not rest. His mind was spinning with the implications of what he had agreed to do. There was a knock on his door around midnight. When he opened it, Arya stood there, having changed out of her combat armor into a flowing dress of deep blue that made her look even more alien and beautiful. May I come in? Sure. She entered and looked around his quarters with mild interest. I wanted to speak with you privately before the ceremony tomorrow, to make certain you understand what you are committing to. I understand enough. You are using me as a political chess piece to prevent a war. Arya flinched slightly at the harsh words. That is not entirely accurate, though I can understand why you would see it that way. You are not a chess piece, Lieutenant. You are a partner in the truest sense. What I am asking you to do requires genuine strength of character. Not everyone could stand before the assembled might of the Valoran Empire and claim equality with a member of the royal family. You really think I can do that? I know you can. I have seen you lead your warriors through impossible situations. I have watched you make decisions that prioritize the lives of others over your own safety. You have what my people call kalanth, which roughly translates to the courage that comes from moral certainty. You know what is right, and you have the strength to pursue it, even when the cost is high. Jake sat down on the edge of his bed, suddenly feeling exhausted. I am terrified, you know, of all this, of what tomorrow means, of being tied to someone I barely know, even if it is just for political purposes. Arya was quiet for a moment, then sat down beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. I am terrified as well. I have never taken a spouse before. In my culture, such bonds are expected to last centuries. The thought of binding myself to someone, even in name only, is deeply unsettling. Why me then? You could have chosen someone more important, a high-ranking officer, or a political figure, because rank and political standing do not equal integrity. I needed someone who would not try to use this bond for personal advancement. Someone who sees it as a duty rather than an opportunity. You are that person, Jake Morrison. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Jake spoke again. What happens after tomorrow? After the ceremony? We maintain the appearance of a genuine partnership. Attend diplomatic functions together. Show unified support for peaceful relations between our peoples. Work to undermine the rebel faction and expose their manipulation. And eventually, when the threat is fully neutralized, we can discuss how to proceed. What if we actually start to like each other? Jake asked with a slight smile. That would complicate things. 1. Arya looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. That would indeed complicate things. Though perhaps not in entirely negative ways. The ceremony took place on the royal flagship in a chamber that seemed designed to make everyone feel small. Hundreds of Valorans, in formal attire, lined the walls, their crimson eyes watching with intense interest. On the opposite side, a contingent of human officials had been rushed in from the nearest fleet position, including several admirals who looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. Jake stood at the center of it all, wearing his dress uniform, feeling like an insect under a microscope. Beside him, Arya wore royal armor that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways, making her look like a goddess of war. Emperor Korvan himself presided over the ceremony, an ancient Valoran whose presence seemed to fill the entire chamber. His eyes held the weight of millennia, and when he spoke, his voice resonated with power. We are gathered to witness a bond that has never been forged before. A union between human and Valoran, between warrior and princess, between two peoples who stand at the precipice of war. Princess Arya of House Nightshade, do you freely choose this human as your spouse? I do, Arya said clearly, her voice carrying across the chamber. Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth, do you freely accept this bond? Jake met Arya's eyes and saw encouragement there. He thought about all the people depending on this moment working. I do. Then before all assembled here, I declare this bond sealed. May it bring unity where there is division, peace where there is conflict, and understanding between our peoples. The Emperor raised his hands. From this moment forward, Jake Morrison is recognized as a member of House Nightshade, with all rights and protections that status confers. The assembled Velorans responded with a sound that was part cheer, part acknowledgement of something sacred. The human officials looked stunned. probably already calculating the political ramifications. Arya turned to Jake, and following Velaran custom, placed her hand over his heart. He mimicked the gesture, placing his hand over hers. Energy seemed to flow between them, something real and tangible that made his hair stand on end. "It is done," Arya said softly, for his ears only. "You are now technically royalty. Try not to let it go to your head." "I will do my best," Jake said, managing a smile despite his racing heart. The reception afterward was surreal. Jake found himself being congratulated by both human admirals and Valoran nobles, many of whom seemed genuinely pleased by the union. Ambassador Collins pulled him aside at one point. "You realize you just became one of the most important people in human space, right? The first human to marry into an alien royal family. The political implications are staggering." "I am trying not to think about that too hard, sir," Collins smiled. "Good instinct. Just focus on the task at hand. You and the princess need to present a unified front over the next few weeks as we work to expose the rebel plot. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. I can do that." What Jake did not say was that presenting a unified front with Arya might be easier than expected. Despite the bizarre circumstances of their arrangement, he found her company surprisingly comfortable. She had a sharp wit, a strategic mind that matched his own, and a genuine passion for preventing unnecessary death. Later that evening, after most of the guests had departed, Jake found Arya standing on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. He joined her, and they stood in companionable silence for a while. "Thank you," Arya said finally, "for taking this risk, for trusting me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for thinking I was worthy of it. Though I am still not entirely sure I am. You are. And in time, I think you will see that." She looked at him with an expression that was almost warm. "We have a difficult road ahead of us. Jake Morrison, the rebels will not give up easily, and there are factions on both sides who will try to undermine what we have built today. But I believe we can succeed if we work together." "Then let us work together," Jake said, offering his hand. Arya took it, her cool fingers wrapping around his. In that moment, standing among the stars with an alien vampire princess who was now technically his wife, Jake felt the weight of the future pressing down on him. But he also felt something else. Hope. Maybe this crazy plan would actually work. Maybe they really could prevent a war. And maybe, just maybe, this political arrangement would become something more than either of them expected. The galaxy was watching. History was being written. And Jake Morrison, a simple lieutenant from Earth, was standing at the center of it all, bound to a princess of an ancient empire, ready to face whatever came next. The first challenge came sooner than expected. 3 days after the ceremony, Jake was reviewing tactical reports when alarms began blaring throughout the flagship. He rushed to the command center, where he found Arya already coordinating with her father's military staff. "What is happening?" Jake asked, pushing through the crowd of officers. Arya turned to him, her expression grim. "The rebels just attacked Harmony Station, a joint human-Velaran research facility in neutral space. They are broadcasting it as an assault by Imperial forces." Jake felt ice in his veins. Harmony Station housed over 3,000 civilians from both species. Casualties? Unknown. Communications were cut off 12 minutes ago. Emperor Corvan entered the command center, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Princess Arya, you will lead the rescue operation. Take the Nightblade and whatever forces you deem necessary. Lieutenant Morrison, you will accompany her as representative of humanity's interests in this matter." Jake nodded sharply. "Understood, Your Majesty." Within 30 minutes, they were aboard the Nightblade, a sleek warship that moved through space like a living shadow. Arya had assembled a strike team of elite Valoran warriors and insisted that Jake's squad join them. Lisa, Martinez, and the others looked both excited and terrified to be part of such an operation. "Estimated arrival time is 4 hours, Arya said, studying holographic displays that showed Harmony Station's last known status. The rebels timed this perfectly. They knew we would have to respond, which means they will be prepared for us. Then we need to be smarter than they expect, Jake said, moving to stand beside her. The Nightblade has cloaking technology that will get us close without detection. We have 40 warriors trained in close quarters combat, and we have element of surprise if we move quickly enough. Jake studied the station's layout, his tactical mind working through scenarios. The rebels will expect us to dock at the main port and breach from there. What if we came in through the maintenance airlocks on the lower levels? They are designed for small maintenance craft, but if we could modify our approach pods, Arya's eyes lit up with understanding. We could insert teams simultaneously at multiple points throughout the station, overwhelming their defenses before they can organize a coherent response. Exactly. Hit them hard and fast from directions they are not watching. They spent the next few hours planning the operation in detail. Jake was impressed by how smoothly they worked together, finishing each other's tactical assessments and building on each other's ideas. The Valoran warriors seemed surprised to see their princess consulting so openly with a human. But they adapted quickly. When they arrived at Harmony Station, the sight that greeted them was sobering. The station's exterior showed signs of weapons fire, and several sections had been depressurized. Debris floated in the surrounding space, remnants of destroyed ships that had tried to escape. Life signs? Arya asked, reading approximately 2,700 individual signatures throughout the station. Most concentrated in the central habitat ring, also detecting at least 60 signatures in areas that match rebel heat signatures. 60 hostiles versus 40 of us. Not ideal odds. We have faced worse, one of the Valoran warriors said confidently. His name was Kale, and he served as Arya's second in command. For the Empire, and for the princess. The other warriors echoed his words, and Jake felt a surge of respect for their loyalty. For Earth and for peace, Jake added, and his squad repeated the words. Arya looked between the two groups and smiled. Then let us show these rebels what happens when humans and Valorans fight together. The insertion went smoothly. Modified approach pods carried small teams to 6 different maintenance airlocks scattered across the station's lower sections. Jake led his squad along with 3 Valoran warriors, while Arya commanded the main assault force heading for the central command center. They breached the airlock without incident and found themselves in a dimly lit maintenance corridor. The artificial gravity was functioning, which was a relief. But the air smelled stale and metallic. Martinez, scout ahead. Lisa, watch our 6. Everyone else, stay tight. Jake ordered quietly. They moved through the station methodically, clearing rooms and checking for civilians. They found their first group of survivors huddled in an auxiliary storage bay. 10 humans and 5 Valorans, all terrified but unharmed. Lieutenant Morrison. One of the humans gasped. We saw the broadcasts. They said you married the princess, to betray humanity. Jake knelt down to look the man in the eye. The broadcasts are lies created by rebels trying to start a war. The princess and I are here to rescue you, along with 40 Valoran warriors who are risking their lives for both our peoples. Does that sound like betrayal to you? The man shook his head slowly. No. No. It does not. Thank you for coming. Stay here and keep quiet. We will come back for you once the station is secure. They continued deeper into the station, encountering and neutralizing several small groups of rebel fighters. The Valorans moved with terrifying efficiency, their enhanced speed and strength making them formidable opponents. Jake's squad provided covering fire and tactical coordination, proving that humans could hold their own even against superior physical capabilities. They were approaching the central habitat ring when Arya's voice came through Jake's comm. Jake, we have a problem. The rebels have rigged the station's reactor to overload. If we cannot stop it, the entire station will explode in less than 20 minutes. Where is the override? Engineering section. Sub-level 9. But it is heavily guarded. I am sending Kale and his team to secure it. 17 point. Engineering section. Tooted for Defert. 17.4. Teen. Calogis. Negative. Kale does not have experience with human-designed reactor systems. I need to go. There was a pause. Jake. That section is crawling with hostiles. I know. But if we do not stop that reactor, everyone dies. Including us. He looked at his squad. Lisa, you are in command. Get those civilians to the escape pods and prepare for emergency evacuation. Lieutenant, I am not letting you run off alone into a death trap. That is an order, Sergeant. Jake's voice was firm, but not harsh. Someone needs to make sure these people get out alive. That someone is you. Lisa clearly wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Do not die, sir. The princess would kill me if I let that happen. Jake managed a grim smile. I will do my best. He made his way to the engineering section with two Valoran warriors who insisted on accompanying him. Their names were Thane and Mira, both young by Valoran standards but veterans of multiple campaigns. The route took them through service tunnels and emergency access shafts, avoiding the main corridors where rebel forces were concentrated. They could hear weapons fire echoing through the station as Arya's main force engaged the enemy in the central sectors. When they reached engineering, Jake could see at least 15 rebels guarding the entrance. They had heavy weapons and defensive positions that would make a frontal assault suicide. We need a distraction, Jake said, thinking quickly. I will provide one, Thane said immediately. Mira, you and the human, get to that reactor. That is not going to work, Jake protested. There are too many of them. Thane smiled, showing fangs. I am faster than you think, human. And I have always wanted to test myself against such odds. For the princess and for this mad alliance she has forged with your kind. Before Jake could stop him, Thane was already moving. He burst into the open with a war cry that seemed to shake the walls, drawing immediate fire from the rebels. But Thane moved like liquid shadow, dodging and weaving between cover, while returning fire with devastating accuracy. Now, Mira hissed, and she and Jake sprinted for a side entrance while the rebels were focused on Thane. They made it inside engineering and found themselves in a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. The reactor core was a massive cylinder in the center, surrounded by control stations and safety systems. And at the main control panel, Jake saw the improvised explosive device the rebels had rigged. Can you disarm it? Mira asked. Jake examined the device, his hands already moving to disconnect power feeds. Not disarm, but I can override the reactor sequence and initiate an emergency shutdown. Give me 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Jake worked with focused intensity, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting control systems, while rebels tried to break through the entrance. Mira held them off with precise bursts of energy fire. But Jake could hear her ammunition counters running low. 90 seconds, Jake called out. An explosion rocked the chamber as the rebels brought in heavier weapons. Mira stumbled but kept firing. Jake could see blood running down her arm. 60 seconds. More rebels poured through the entrance. Mira was forced back, taking cover behind the reactor housing itself. Jake heard her grunt in pain as a shot grazed her shoulder. 30 seconds. Almost there. The rebels had them surrounded now. Mira was down to her last energy cell, and Jake was completely exposed at the control panel. He saw several weapons trained on him and knew that any second he would be dead. Then, Arya crashed through the ceiling like an avenging angel. She landed in the middle of the rebel formation with such force that the floor cracked beneath her boots. What followed was the most brutal display of combat skill Jake had ever witnessed. Arya moved through the rebels like a force of nature, each movement calculated to maximum efficiency. Within seconds, the entire enemy force was neutralized. Jake, she said, not even breathing hard. Give me 10 seconds. He made the final connection, and the reactor's ominous hum shifted to a lower, safer frequency. Red warning lights switched to amber, then green. The countdown that had been ticking away in the corner of his vision stopped at 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Reactor is in emergency shutdown, Jake said, sagging against the control panel. Station is safe. Arya was beside him in an instant, her hand on his shoulder. You cut that dangerously close. I had faith you would show up at the right moment. That was remarkably foolish of you. Yeah, probably. Jake managed a weak smile. Thanks for the rescue. Thank Thane. He held off 20 rebels single-handedly for 3 minutes. He is currently in the medical bay, being treated for 17 separate injuries, most of which would kill a human instantly. He is very proud of himself. He earned that pride. They took stock of the situation. The rebel forces had been neutralized or captured. The civilians were being evacuated to the Nightblade and other ships that had arrived as reinforcements. Harmony Station had sustained significant damage but could be repaired. Most importantly, they had recording evidence of the entire attack, including communications showing it was orchestrated by the rebel faction, not the Imperial government. Back on the Nightblade, Jake found himself in the medical bay getting checked for injuries he barely remembered receiving. Lisa was there, looking relieved. Good work today, Lieutenant. You saved a lot of lives. We all did. How are the civilians? Shaken but alive. Many of them specifically asked to thank you and the princess. I think you two made believers out of them. Tudeberd. 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 Jake nodded, feeling exhaustion settling into his bones. When the medical staff finally cleared him, he went looking for Arya and found her in her private quarters, still in combat armor, reviewing tactical reports. You should rest, Jake said from the doorway. I could say the same to you. That was reckless. Going to engineering alone, says the woman who dropped through a ceiling to take on 20 armed hostiles. Arya smiled slightly. Fair point. Come in, Jake. I want to discuss something with you. He entered and closed the door behind him. Arya gestured to a chair, and he sat gratefully. What we did today, Arya began, choosing her words carefully. That is what this alliance is supposed to be. Not just political theater. Real cooperation between our peoples. You risked your life for Velaran civilians, and my warriors did the same for humans. That is the future I want to build. Or, it is the future worth fighting for, Jake agreed. Though I admit, when you first proposed this marriage bond, I did not fully understand what you were trying to create. I thought it was just about preventing a war. But it is bigger than that. Is it not? Much bigger. I am trying to forge a genuine partnership between two species that have barely begun to know each other. The marriage bond was the catalyst. But the real work is showing both our peoples that we are stronger together than apart. Jake considered this. You know people are going to test that. The rebels are not going to give up just because we stopped one attack. I know. Which is why we need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Arya met his eyes. I need to know that I can count on you. Jake, not just as a political partner, but as someone I can trust in combat and in crisis. You can count on me. You have proven yourself to me a dozen times over in the past few days. I am all in on this, Arya. Whatever it takes. She seemed to relax slightly, as if she had been holding her breath, waiting for his answer. Good. Because what comes next is going to test us in ways we cannot yet imagine. The rebels have powerful allies, and they will not stop with one failed attack. We need to be ready. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Arya became an effective team. They attended diplomatic functions together, presenting a united front. They coordinated military responses to additional rebel provocations. They worked with both human and Valoran intelligence services to map out the full extent of the conspiracy. The intelligence reports painted a disturbing picture. The rebel faction, led by a Valoran noble named Lord Kyne, had been planning this war for years. They had infiltrated both human and Valoran governments, planted false information, and orchestrated attacks designed to look like acts of aggression from the other side. The marriage bond between Jake and Arya had disrupted their timeline, but not stopped their plans entirely. They are adapting, Arya said during one of their strategy sessions. She stood before a holographic display showing rebel movements across 6 systems. Every time we shut down one operation, they open 2 more. We are fighting a Hydra. Jake studied the patterns, looking for weaknesses. They are spreading themselves thin. All these operations require resources, personnel, coordination. There has to be a central command node somewhere. We have been searching for it for months with no success. Kane is extremely careful about security. Then we need to make him come to us. Jake's mind was working through possibilities. What if we leaked information about a major diplomatic summit? Something big enough that Kane would see it as the perfect opportunity to strike and destabilize everything we have built. Arya's eyes lit with understanding. A trap. Use ourselves as bait. Exactly. We announce a major treaty signing between Earth and the Valoran Empire. Full diplomatic presence from both sides. Maximum media coverage. Kane will not be able to resist such a target. That is incredibly dangerous. If we fail to stop the attack, we could lose dozens of high-ranking officials from both our governments. But if we succeed, we cut the head off the Hydra and end this conflict before it escalates further. Jake met her gaze steadily. I think it is worth the risk. Arya considered for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. We will present the idea to my father and your fleet command. If they approve, we proceed. The approval came through within 48 hours, though it was clear many officials on both sides thought the plan was insane. Nevertheless, preparations began for the Summit of Unity, to be held on a neutral station called Pinnacle Point, in 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Security protocols were designed and redesigned. Contingency plans were developed for every possible attack scenario. Jake worked 18-hour days, coordinating with multiple intelligence agencies, barely sleeping. Arya was equally consumed by the preparations. But she made a point of checking on Jake regularly. Late one night, she found him in the strategy room, staring at holographic projections with bloodshot eyes. You need to rest, she said firmly. I will rest when this is over. There are still 12 vulnerabilities in our security perimeter that I have not addressed. Arya walked over and physically closed the holographic displays. Those vulnerabilities will still be there in 6 hours after you have slept. What they will not survive is your collapse from exhaustion during the actual summit. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Fine, 6 hours. But then I get back to work. Agreed. Arya hesitated, then added, You have done remarkable work these past weeks. I know this arrangement was not what you signed up for when you joined Earth's military, yet you have committed yourself fully to it. It stopped being just an arrangement somewhere along the way, Jake admitted. I actually care about making this work, not just because of the political implications, but because I believe in what we are trying to build. Something shifted in Arya's expression, an emotion Jake had not seen before. I feel the same way. This has become more than a political necessity for me as well. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Arya stepped back, her professional demeanor returning. Get some rest, Jake. We have a trap to spring. The day of the summit arrived with perfect weather and maximum security. Pinnacle Point Station had been transformed into a fortress, with warships from both Earth and the Valoran Empire surrounding it in defensive formations. Inside, diplomats and officials mingled nervously, aware that they were essentially bait in an elaborate trap. Jake wore his dress uniform and stood beside Arya, who looked stunning in formal royal attire that combined traditional Valoran elements with concessions to human aesthetic sensibilities. Together they greeted arrivals and played their parts perfectly. The picture of a unified partnership between species. Emperor Corvin presided over the opening ceremonies, his ancient voice carrying authority and hope. Today marks a new chapter in the relationship between humanity and the Valoran Empire. We stand together not in spite of our differences, but because of them. United in purpose. committed to peace, and bound by bonds that transcend politics. The crowd applauded, and Jake felt a swell of pride. Whatever happened next, they had already accomplished something remarkable. The very existence of this summit proved that cooperation between their species was possible. Then the alarm started blaring. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. The station's security chief announced. Configuration matches Rebel fleet signatures. They are moving into attack formation. Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the inner chambers. Area commanded immediately. Military personnel to defensive stations. This is not a drill. Jake activated his comm. All units, this is Morrison. Execute Defensive Plan Delta. I repeat, execute Plan Delta. The carefully rehearsed responses kicked in across the station. Civilians were ushered to reinforced shelters. Weapons systems came online. Fighter craft launched from both human and Valoran carriers to intercept the incoming threat. But something was wrong. Jake felt it in his gut even before the reports started coming in. Sir, the rebel ships are not engaging. They are just holding position outside weapons range. That does not make sense, Lisa said from her position at a tactical console. Why come in force if they are not going to attack? Jake's blood ran cold as understanding hit him. Because the real attack is already inside the station. The fleet is a distraction. Arya's eyes went wide. Infiltrators. They must have smuggled operatives in, among the diplomatic staff. Security. Initiate lockdown protocols. Begin scanning for unauthorized weapons or explosives. Jake ordered. Already moving toward the main assembly hall, where the actual treaty signing was about to take place. They reached the hall just as the first explosion rocked the station. It was not large enough to cause major structural damage, but it was perfectly placed to create panic. Diplomats scattered. Security teams rushed in conflicting directions. And in the chaos, Jake saw them. 4 Valoran warriors in stolen security uniforms, moving with purpose toward the podium where Emperor Corvin stood. They had weapons drawn, and murder in their eyes. Jake reacted on instinct, tackling the nearest assassin, and sending them both crashing into a row of seats. He heard Arya's battle cry, as she engaged 2 more. The 4th assassin made it to the podium and raised his weapon at the Emperor. A shot rang out. But it was not the assassin who fired. It was Kale, Arya's second-in-command, who had been stationed as the Emperor's personal guard. The assassin dropped, and Kale moved to shield his Emperor with his own body. The fight was over in less than 30 seconds. All 4 assassins were dead or incapacitated. But the damage had been done. The summit was in chaos, and more explosions were echoing through other parts of the station. We need to find Kaine, Arya said, breathing hard. He is here somewhere, directing this operation. He would not miss the chance to oversee his masterpiece personally. Jake pulled up station schematics on his tactical pad. If I was directing a complex operation like this, I would want a command post with good communications access but away from the fighting. The secondary control room on level 7. It has all the access he would need but is not a high-traffic area. Then that is where we go. They fought their way through corridors filled with rebel operatives and confused civilians. Jake's training and Arya's supernatural abilities complemented each other perfectly. Where he provided tactical awareness and precise shooting, she brought overwhelming physical prowess and centuries of combat experience. They burst into the secondary control room to find Lord Kane standing before a wall of displays, watching the chaos unfold with satisfaction. He was tall even by Valoran standards, with jet-black hair and eyes that burned with fanatic intensity. Princess Arya, he said without turning around. And the human pet. How predictable that you would find me. It is over, Kine. Your fleet is being pushed back. Your operatives are being neutralized. Surrender now. And perhaps my father will show mercy. Kine finally turned to face them, and Jake was shocked to see that he was smiling. Over? My dear princess. This is just beginning. Did you really think I would stake everything on a single operation? Even now, My forces are moving against targets across human space. Colony worlds, trade stations, civilian transports, all targets that will be blamed on the Valoran Empire, thanks to the false evidence we have planted. We will expose your deception, Arya said. But Jake heard uncertainty in her voice. Perhaps eventually. But by then, the war will have already started. Public opinion will have turned against this ridiculous alliance of yours. And in the chaos that follows, I will seize power from your weak father and lead our people to the dominance they deserve. Jake stepped forward, his weapon trained on Kine. You are talking about killing millions of innocent people. For what? Political power? That is insane. That is evolution, Kine replied coldly. The strong dominate the weak. It is the natural order. Your species should never have been allowed to spread beyond your own solar system. You are a disease. And I intend to be the cure. You will die before that happens, Arya said. And Jake had never heard such ice in her voice. Kanie's smile widened. Will I? You forget, Princess, that I have been preparing for this confrontation for years. I know all your strengths. I know all your weaknesses. And I know the one thing that will absolutely destroy you. He moved faster than Jake could track, producing a weapon from behind his back and firing. But he did not aim at Arya. He aimed at Jake. The world seemed to slow down. Jake saw the energy bolt, streaking toward his chest. He knew he could not dodge in time. He thought about his squad, his family back on Earth, and Arya, who had trusted him with so much. Then Arya was in front of him. And the bolt meant for his chest hit her shoulder instead. She stumbled but did not fall, her hand going to the wound that was already bleeding purple blood. Her eyes blazed with fury as she launched herself at Kine with a speed that defied physics. What followed was the most brutal fight Jake had ever witnessed. Arya and Kane moved like lightning, their strikes creating shockwaves that cracked the walls. They were evenly matched in speed and strength, but Arya had something Kane did not. She had something worth fighting for beyond personal ambition. The fight raged across the control room, destroying equipment and sending showers of sparks cascading down. Jake tried to help, firing when he had clear shots, but mostly he just tried to stay out of the way of two beings who could kill him with casual ease. Finally, Arya found an opening. She caught Kane's wrist in mid-strike, twisted, and drove him to the ground with such force that the floor buckled. Before he could recover, she had her hand around his throat. "Yield!" she commanded, her voice raw with pain and fury. Kine laughed, even with her hand crushing his windpipe. "Kill me if you wish. It changes nothing. The attacks are already in motion. You cannot stop them all." Arya looked at Jake, and in her eyes he saw the terrible choice before her. She could kill Kane here and now, delivering justice for his crimes, or she could try to use him to stop the attacks he had set in motion. "We need him alive," Jake said quietly. "He is the only one who knows all the details of what he planned. Without that information, we cannot stop the attacks in time." Arya's hand tightened for just a moment. Then she released Kine and pulled him to his feet. "You will tell us everything. Every target, every operative, every detail of your plan. And why would I do that? Because if you do not, I will let Jake interrogate you using human methods. And humans can be remarkably creative when properly motivated." Kine looked at Jake with something like respect in his eyes. "The pet has teeth after all. Very well. I will tell you what you want to know. But understand that even if you stop every attack I planned, you have only delayed the inevitable. War between our species is coming. Your precious alliance is built on sand. They secured Kane in the station's detention facility under maximum security. Then came the frantic race to prevent his network of attacks from succeeding. Using the information they extracted from him, combined with intelligence gathered by both human and Valoran forces, they managed to thwart most of the planned operations. Not all. 3 attacks succeeded before they could be stopped, killing a total of 47 people. Each death weighed on Jake like a physical burden. He had failed to save them all. The aftermath of the summit attack was complex and politically charged. On one hand, the exposure of Kane's conspiracy vindicated everything Jake and Arya had been saying about the rebel faction. On the other hand, the attacks that had succeeded gave ammunition to those who wanted to blame the entire Valoran Empire. Jake found himself giving testimony before both human and Valoran investigative bodies. He explained the events clearly and honestly, never wavering in his defense of the alliance with Arya and her father's government. It was exhausting and often frustrating. But gradually, public opinion began to shift. 2 months after the summit, Jake and Arya were finally able to take a break from the relentless pace of political and military obligations. Emperor Corvin granted them permission to visit Earth, something Jake had not done since the day he had married an alien vampire princess. Standing on the observation deck of the transport taking them to Earth, Jake felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. What would his family think of Arya? What would Earth look like after all he had experienced among the stars? Arya joined him at the viewport, her shoulder fully healed from the injury she had taken, saving his life. You are anxious about returning home. Is it that obvious? I have learned to read your expressions quite well these past months. You should know that I am also nervous. Meeting one's spouse's family is apparently stressful, regardless of species. Jake smiled at that. We have faced down armed rebels and prevented a galactic war. I think we can handle dinner with my parents. I would not be so confident. From what I understand, human parents can be quite intimidating when judging their children's choice of partners. They landed at a military base in North America, and Jake's family was waiting. His mother, a practical woman who had raised 3 children while working as a teacher, took one look at Arya and enveloped her in a hug that probably would have broken ribs on a normal human. Thank you for keeping my son alive, she said fiercely. Arya looked surprised but pleased. He has done the same for me on multiple occasions. Your son is quite remarkable. Jake's father, a retired engineer with a dry sense of humor, shook Arya's hand carefully. So you are the vampire princess who convinced my son to get married in space without inviting his family to the wedding. We are going to have words about that, young lady. Dad, Jake protested, but he was smiling. I apologize for the breach of protocol, Arya said seriously. The circumstances were rather unusual. Perhaps we could host a formal reception here on Earth to make amends? Jake's mother's eyes lit up. Oh, could we? I have always wanted to plan a wedding reception. Over dinner that evening, Jake watched Arya interact with his family and felt something shift in his chest. She was patient with his younger sister's endless questions about Valoran culture. She engaged his father in a serious discussion about engineering differences between human and alien technology. She helped his mother in the kitchen despite having no idea how to operate most human appliances. She was trying. Really trying to connect with the people who mattered to him. And his family, to their credit, was accepting her, not as an alien or a princess, but as the person who stood beside their son. Later, after his family had gone to bed, Jake and Arya sat on the back porch of his childhood home, looking up at stars that seemed dimmer now that Jake had traveled among them. Your family is wonderful, Arya said quietly. Warm and welcoming in ways that are rare among Valoran nobility. They liked you too. My mom already sent me 3 texts about how beautiful you are and how I better not screw this up. Arya laughed. A sound Jake had heard more frequently lately. Your mother is very direct. I appreciate that quality. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Jake said something he had been thinking about for weeks but had not quite found the courage to voice. This arrangement between us, the political marriage bond. I know we agreed it would last only until the threat of war was resolved. But Kine was right about one thing. Even with him captured, the tensions between our peoples have not disappeared. The threat is still there, just diminished. What are you saying? Jake took a deep breath. I am saying that I do not want this to be temporary anymore. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about politics for me. I actually enjoy working with you. I respect you. I trust you with my life. And I think maybe I am starting to care about you in ways that go beyond professional partnership. Arya was very still, her ancient eyes studying him in the darkness. Jake Morrison, are you attempting to court me according to human customs? Maybe. I am not really sure what the Valoran equivalent would be. There is not really an equivalent. Valoran courtship is typically very formal and involves extensive negotiations between families. She paused, but I find myself more interested in human approaches at the moment. They seem more genuine. So is that a yes? It is an acknowledgement that my feelings have evolved in similar directions to yours. I find myself thinking about you when we are apart. I value your opinion more than protocol would suggest is appropriate. I worry about your safety in ways that go beyond political necessity. She turned to face him directly. I believe humans would call this developing affection. Jake reached out and took her hand, her skin cool against his. So, where do we go from here? We continue as we have been, but with honesty about our feelings. We let this alliance grow into something more organic and real. We give ourselves permission to care about each other without the weight of obligation. Arya smiled. And we plan an Earth wedding reception to make your mother happy. Jake laughed. That actually sounds perfect. They sat together under the stars, a human lieutenant and an alien vampire princess, bound by choice rather than necessity, facing an uncertain future with growing confidence that they could handle whatever came next. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Jake had experienced since this crazy journey began. He and Arya continued their work preventing conflict and building bridges between their peoples. But now, there was an ease between them that had not existed before. They were not just partners. They were becoming friends, and maybe something more. The wedding reception that Jake's mother planned turned into a massive event. What started as a simple family gathering expanded to include military colleagues, diplomatic officials, and representatives from both human and Valoran governments. It became a celebration not just of their union, but of the alliance itself. Jake wore his dress uniform, while Arya wore a stunning gown that somehow blended Valoran and human design elements. They greeted hundreds of guests, posed for countless photos, and delivered speeches about unity and hope. But the moment Jake remembered most clearly came late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed. He and Arya stood alone in the garden where the reception had been held, music drifting from the nearby pavilion. Dance with me, Arya said, offering her hand. I should warn you. I am not very good at this. Neither am I. Valoran dancing is very different from human traditions. We will be equally terrible together. They swayed awkwardly to the music, neither quite sure of the steps, both laughing at their mistakes. And somewhere in that clumsy, imperfect moment, Jake realized something important. This was what the alliance was really about. Not grand political gestures or military cooperation. It was about two different beings learning to move together, despite their differences. It was about choosing to meet each other where they were, not where protocol said they should be. I love you, Jake said, surprised by his own words. Arya stopped moving, her crimson eyes wide. That is a significant declaration in your culture, is it not? Yes, and I probably should have waited for a more romantic moment. But it is true. I love you, Arya. Not because of politics or duty or any of that. Just because of who you are. She was quiet for so long that Jake started to worry he had made a terrible mistake. Then she smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. In my language, there is a word, Kalinth Ari. It means the courage to bind oneself to another, despite uncertainty, the strength to love without guarantee of return. She placed her hand over his heart. I believe I have Kalinth Ari for you. Jake Morrison, which is the closest thing to what you call love that my people have. Jake pulled her closer, and they stood there in the garden, human and Valoran, bound by something far stronger than any political alliance. Around them, the galaxy continued to turn, full of challenges and dangers yet to come. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had found something rare and precious, something worth fighting for, something that might just change the universe.